So let's go ahead and have a word of prayer, and I'll say a little bit of a word about Nathanael, and then we will jump right into it. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you today. We thank you for your love and goodness, and I thank you, God, for the way that you have gifted each of us uniquely. We're all unique creations of yours, and have different gifts and abilities. And I thank you for Nathanael and for the gift and the passion you have created within him for media and for the way that he is using that effectively. And be with him as he shares today, and be with Chad and others that will view this as they seek to learn and relate how they can use media more effectively in their situations, and bless them in those efforts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, I've actually known Nathanael a long time. I don't know that I could accurately say that I've known him all of his life. I probably have known of him all of his life, but I know his parents well, who are missionaries in Taiwan, which is actually where my wife and I adopted our son Joseph from. So we sort of feel a special connection there. And Nathanael was a student here while I've been working at Johnson since '96. So he came and left while I've been here. And we've actually collaborated on projects. Nathanael is really the one who did Johnson's historical videos a few years ago when we celebrated our 125-year anniversary, and he and I worked very closely on that. He wrote the scripts and really did all the work on those. So he and I know each other fairly well. How long have you been at Good News, Nathanael?
I am actually, tomorrow will be my 2-year anniversary.
Okay, well, that's good. It doesn't seem like it's been that long ago. I can claim a little bit of role in that. I got a call, I guess, from Mike Scroggy when they were considering Nathanael, and he wanted to know my opinion. And I said I can recommend him highly. It sounds to me like it's ideal, and I think it's proved to be so. So that's great. All right, Chad, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll turn it over to Nathanael to present.
Well, like I said, I'm kind of from Las Vegas in a way. When I graduated from high school there, I went into the Air Force, and when I got out of the Air Force, I went back to Las Vegas. I actually became a Christian as an adult. I had very limited church background as a kid. When I went back to Las Vegas, I found Central Christian Church, which at the time Gene Apple was there, and got to be good friends with one of the pastors on staff there, was Jonathan Wolfgang. Yeah. And that's kind of how I ended up at Johnson, was through Jonathan. And anyway, so I went to Johnson, and I guess the rest is history. You know, I was in Kentucky at a small church there for about 7 years before we ended up in Virginia. My wife's originally from Virginia, so she grew up about 2.5 hours from where we're at right now. And then I've been here about 8 years now.
Okay. What attracted you to this workshop? Anything specific?
Well, just the fact that it talked about, media and just technology and stuff. I'm not the most savvy when it comes to technology. So anything, I just thought maybe there might be some helpful, I don't know, pointers of things, that we could do, that I could do, that might help. Just kind of in more in general terms, I guess.
Okay. Very good. Well, Nathanael, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Yeah. Glad to have you in here, Chad, and then hopefully some others will catch it on the recording and be beneficial to you. So as Philip already mentioned, I'm a graduate of Johnson, class 2012. As we mentioned, I got a media minor from Johnson, and then later got a Master of Fine Arts at Regent University in Film and TV. and very happy to be working at Good News Productions International out of Joplin, Missouri now. I work over the international operations. We've got teams in different places all over the world made up of nationals from those countries. So big pleasure for me to be able to connect with them all regularly and get updates about their projects, sometimes do a little advising, but mostly make sure they have what they need to make sure those projects can happen and really be effective to share the gospel with people in their part of the world. So that's just a little bit about what I'm doing lately. And about this workshop, I'm just going to try to kind of lay a groundwork of possibilities that are at that intersection of media and ministry, and look at that from just a couple angles. And maybe you'll learn a little bit, Chad, of what you guys have done, or maybe some things you've heard about. And maybe Philip will have some things to pipe in too about Woodlawn, where he goes to church, or other things that he's noticed. But it's not going to be a how-to so much as just kind of looking at a lot of things that are happening. I'm kind of in a good seat to see some trends and see a bunch of things that people are trying. So we're going to try to just show some of those things and go through that. So I'm going to try to share a little presentation here. Hopefully you'll be able to see it here in a moment. Okay. All right. So bringing media into your ministry, just the general kind of topic of the course. And first way we're going to kind of look at this question is to look at what I'm just going to generally call church media. So media to be used just to kind of keep your regular church activities going. It's kind of interesting to do this at this time, in the middle of the pandemic. People have really been kind of diving into media because they've had to, when people have had to be social distanced. But I think some of these things that we've started to do during this time will actually be habits that we probably will keep up doing, just because there's a greater influx of people who are able to be part of your local church through some of these means. So I want to look at some ways that we're just keeping church services going, or keeping other regular meetings going through media, and just some ways that that's happening first. And then we're going to dive into a whole other avenue of media and ministry afterward. But getting started here, I'm going to start with some things that are probably pretty straightforward for some people. Might seem like duh things to some, but hopefully some of these will be new to folks who might watch this as well. So media for church services, one key thing I think that people have realized during this time, or one very helpful thing, is to use a live stream. You have your church service going, set up a camera, you've got a live stream kit, and allow people to watch live. You can do that through YouTube, you can do that through Facebook. If you have a site, you can host it through that. And it's possible to do that, whether you have an audience watching there in the room or not. So you can do that a couple different ways. It might be looking something like this picture where you've got your camera set up as everything's happening on stage. So it actually is live, but you can also do it as a premiere. You might have heard that term in social media context of doing a premiere of content. And so for instance, on Facebook, you can set a premiere where you've got your whole thing already captured, already recorded, but you're going to say, hey, we're going to put this out there starting at this time. So we're going to start it like this says, at 2 p.m. You can join in and watch at 2 p.m. and make comments, and a bunch of other people will be watching at the same time. But after it's over, it's going to be saved on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're putting it up, so others are able to watch it later as well. And of course, that's possible with live stream too. But people are kind of making use of both of those approaches, either live stream, where it's actually happening in that moment as people are watching it, or premiere, where you put it all together beforehand, and then people are able to watch it together at a certain time. And then either way, you can also watch it later. So I think with Premiere, it kind of allows for some higher production quality, since you can spend some more time putting things together, whereas a live stream obviously is a little bit more on the fly. And just to talk about the potential of either of these possibilities, live stream or Premiere, one of our teams at GMPI in India has been involved with a premier church project, a weekly premiere of a church service in India. And that church started at 1,200 physical members, pretty large church, especially for India in some areas. But once they've launched online and started to do their weekly premiere every Sunday, they've actually seen a peak of over 500,000 views. So you've gone from 1,200 people sitting in the seats in a church building to over 500,000 people watching from their homes. And who knows how many people that actually is. That's just the number of views. There could be families watching together. A little bit hard to tell there. But there's a lot of possibility to expand that audience for your church. So that's one of the really cool things about getting online with your church services. Another thing that a lot of churches have also jumped into is making a podcast of their church service, especially the sermons available, so that, hey, if you're not there one Sunday, or maybe you couldn't watch it live, you couldn't watch it on Sunday, you can go back sometime during the week and go on the podcast and catch up that way, which some people tend to really enjoy. So that's another little tidbit there. Moving on from that, I think during this time with the pandemic, it's been a good opportunity for some churches to start a website, get a website up and going. Maybe they haven't tried that before, and now that people aren't able to come into the building as much, at least for a few months, especially early on, maybe they decided to invest in that, in putting together a church website. And a church website doesn't necessarily have to be really billowing and a large platform. It can be pretty simple. You might mostly just need a landing page for people to kind of come to, and then you can point them in the right direction, whether to a YouTube page or Facebook page, whatever you might want to do. So it can be pretty simple, but I think a lot of people are finding new ways to effectively use their websites, or they're just starting it for the first time and using it as a kind of a hub to connect with people or to point them in the right direction. One of the good things about having a website for your church versus a Facebook page or something else on social media is basically your website is owned space, and those other social media platforms are rented space. We've seen so many changes over the past year with Facebook. It just kind of has gone to show that that really is not necessarily the most firm of ground. That can be shifting. They can change some of their rules, and so it's good to maybe have your own page, even if it's simple and doesn't have a lot of different layers to it. Something simple is good, and I think some churches have really dove into that. Many different ways to set up your own website, and a lot of these services have made it pretty easy, even if you don't have much experience. One that I'll just mention is a Cause Machine. As I mentioned here, you can go at causemachine.org to look at setting up a website. They're particularly kind of set up to lend themselves toward nonprofits. I think useful for churches too. Not free, but they're usually pretty good to work with for ministries or groups that have a cause. And GMPI, we've worked with them some on some kind of secondary sites that we have. So we found them quite useful. So far, Chad, I'm curious, what has your church been doing for online service stuff? Have you been using a live stream or just putting videos up? Have you been premiering them? What have you guys been doing?
Yeah, we have been doing the live stream. Of course, like a lot of churches, before the pandemic, we weren't doing the live stream at all.
Right.
We're a pretty small church. But when the pandemic first started and we had to shut down and we weren't able to meet in person at all, we just jumped into the live stream, and then we were live streaming on a phone.
Yep.
Started off on an iPhone. We were live streaming, got a tripod and just put it on the tripod and did that onto Facebook. So yeah, no, we haven't done the premiere thing. I've heard about the Facebook premiere. I'm not that familiar with it though, and I wasn't really exactly sure how to get into the premiere thing. So when we were not meeting, we would just basically have like me and the worship team that would come on Sunday morning, because in our state we were still okay as long as we had like no more than 10 people.
Mm-hmm.
So So we would meet there and we would film the service, do the service like we normally would. It's just, everybody's online rather than in the building. Just recently, we are just now in the process of now transitioning over to YouTube rather than Facebook. And primarily that's because we already had a pretty nice camera that we'd been recording our sermons on, our video sermons on. But we just had never used it for live streaming. It's very capable of it. We just never have done it. So we're in the process now of transitioning over to that and using our camera to have all of everything going into the soundboard, which will make the sound quality better and stuff. We're still kind of getting the the instrument levels and all that kind of thing leveled out so it sounds good. But anyway, so we're in the transition of doing away with the Facebook and then just going through our actual mounted camera and through our YouTube channel and that kind of thing. So yeah, we did that when we were I haven't been doing it now, but when we were in the early stages of the pandemic and we weren't able to meet in person like once or twice a week. I think it was like twice a week. I would just get on Facebook Live and just do a little devotional time, just as an added way of just trying to encourage people during the lockdown and all that kind of thing. And I guess that's really about all. We haven't gotten too much into like Zoom meetings and Zoom groups and all that. Just I don't think our people really would have responded to that very well. Our youth minister did do some like youth lessons that were on video. To be honest with you, they weren't really that well received, or it didn't seem like that many were really responding to it. And again, that's with our church. If we tried to do the Zoom groups, it probably wouldn't have been received very well because, we have a lot of older people and most of them probably aren't going to do the Zoom thing. And the younger families that we have, it probably would have been the same thing as those youth lessons. They just wouldn't prioritize getting on a digital type meeting type of thing. So we haven't really gotten into the Zoom groups though, but we definitely have been doing the live streaming.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think your story there, what your church has done is did a good job of illustrating, I think, what a lot of churches have experienced is, you start somewhere out of necessity, and then over this past year, I think you've found ways to sharpen that and to grow in that, better quality as time goes on, figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. So yeah, that's right. A great picture of that.
And we were real fortunate, Nathanael, too, as far as like the online giving thing. We had just gotten our online giving set up, like, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 weeks, something like that, maybe a month at most before the pandemic hit.
Wow.
So that was that was good timing there.
No kidding.
And people used it quite a bit during the shutdown. They're not using it quite as much now. Now that they can come. Well, not everybody is coming, but for those that do come, but it got used quite a bit during that shutdown time. So that was good timing there. We have our website for our giving, we use the Give. GYVE that you're probably familiar with. So far they've been real good. That's who we use for the online giving. And our website, you're talking about that website provider that does nonprofits and things like that. We use Church WebWorks, and they've been really good to work with. We've had real good success with them. They're I think, I don't know how much exactly website companies usually charge, but they seem to be pretty fair in their pricing, and their customer service is real good. It's pretty user friendly to update and things like that, and their customer service is pretty spot on. They get to you pretty quick if you need help with something. So we've had good success with them. Of course, we've had Church WebWorks for many years now, but I was just adding that one in there that they've been good for us, and they primarily, I think, work with churches and nonprofits and stuff, kind of like that one you were talking about, I guess.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm glad you brought it up. I was hoping that through this we'd hear a few other ideas from people watching and listening in. So great to check that one out. Church WebWorks.
Yeah, they're out of Seattle, I think, Washington. Although I think they do have a couple people that work remotely from other places.
Gotcha. Very good. Well, speaking of something that you mentioned, I'm going to kind of touch on it briefly here. is making the most of Zoom. I almost hesitated to go in here because we've all just had so much of Zoom at this point. But just to talk a little bit about a certain distinction that might be helpful for some people that are kind of trying to make use of it or still feeling it out. You've got your Zoom meeting. We're all familiar with this. You see this picture here that I'm sure we've all seen in our own conferences many, many times, where everybody's able to come in, to be seen, to be heard, use the chat. People are allowed to screen shares like that. And so that's a very, very familiar thing, a Zoom meeting. And that allows for a lot of people to, have a high level of interaction, maybe a smaller number of participants, but it's probably a great way to do Bible studies or similar gatherings if people are willing to engage that way. Mm-hmm. However, there's also the Zoom webinar, which is a little bit different. You're not going to see all those faces. It leans itself more to just a presenter or a few presenters, a panel. So you're just going to see them, and you're going to see the presentation of what they're doing. There's integration of things like polls and a question and answer feature. So that's going to allow you to have a more control over interaction of what's going on in that group. Less likelihood of interruptions. Somebody forgetting to mute themselves, and you hear the kids in the background or whatever. So it allows for a little bit more focus. It also allows for many more members to be involved. And as you kind of see in this little shot here, there's actually even some possibility of going straight to live on certain platforms there. It says live on Facebook, live on YouTube, so different possibilities there. That might be actually if someone, as some groups, maybe not many, but as some groups have actually tried to do church services on Zoom, that might be more of your, in some ways, more of your way to go if you're wanting a little bit more control over what's happening in your service. And so, as Chad mentioned, I think some groups kind of can use Zoom, and some groups just may not prefer that. And I think we're all pretty much up to here with Zoom, but we keep going on it because that's a little bit of way that the world is working now. So just to talk a little bit about Zoom in that way. Now to talk also a little bit about something that most people are probably at least a little familiar with, are Facebook pages and groups. And so you can, if you're on Facebook, you can, if you have an account on Facebook, you can also set up a Facebook page for many different sorts of things. I put a screenshot up here of Good News Productions International, our Facebook page. And so we're registered on there as a religious organization. We put up a lot of videos, a lot of posts about projects that we have going on and how those are moving forward. We use to connect with donors. We also have a Facebook business account, which you can kind of merge your business account with your page and do some unique things with that, arranging for particular donations and setting up ads, a lot of different options if you're using a Facebook page. Those pages, people can search on Facebook and find them. You can promote them. So it's a very public platform for Facebook pages. And a lot of people are probably very, very familiar with those already. To talk a little bit more, though, about groups. A group is fairly different than a page. A group is more focused on the community of people involved on that platform. So a page, is more about the messages you're putting out, but a group kind of allows for a lot more people to speak into it. So just as an example, here at GMPI, we also put together a small prayer group for some of our staff around the world. And so we just use this for very, very simple purposes. Of a couple times a week, we post a scripture to think about as you pray, and another time a week we post something several prayer requests from our network that people can be in prayer about. And then it also allows anybody in our network that's a member on the page to chime in and comment on those things, or add their own post about, hey, please pray about this. We're experiencing this. Please remember that as you pray. And so that's a good but quite different approach to using Facebook than a page is. Groups can be public or private. If they're public, anybody can join. If they're private, obviously they have to join either through someone's invitation. Most likely, they have to be kind of pulled in from inside in that way. They can also be visible. So you can, if they're visible, you can search them on Facebook and find them, but then they could still be public or private. You could find them through search, but you may not be able to join readily until you ask to join and are allowed to come in. Or they might be hidden. So if you search, you're not going to find them. That's actually for our GMPI prayer group. We're a private group and we're hidden. We're not going to allow lots of different people in. It's really just for the core of our staff to be involved. And we talk about, some a little bit private or sensitive things when it comes to prayer requests. So it's good to keep it contained. But if you want it to be a lot more open for anybody to kind of get involved with whatever you're doing in some ministry, whether it could be a youth group, it could be maybe a particular kind of care ministry your church is doing. A group might be a good little platform for that, since so many people are already on Facebook and can just readily jump into that. So that's another possibility of using a Facebook in that way. So we're all very familiar with Zoom, very familiar with Facebook. A couple other ideas that you all might be using or maybe haven't heard about as much. A couple things focused on missions first. We're very much used to Zoom, and we're probably used to doing it at different hours at this point. And so I know my church, and I think lots of others have actually taken an opportunity that, hey, we're already getting used to this. Why don't we actually make more of a connection with some of our missionary partners or other international partners that we have? Let's get them online and let's allow more of the church to kind of hear from them and talk with them. And so you can do international calls using Zoom or maybe some other platform. Maybe you can make a room on Facebook Messenger. You could probably use in a similar way. But just allowing for some actual kind of digital FaceTime between your church members here in the U.S. and people that are overseas working. It's kind of now that kind of has opened up, video conferencing from all over the world. Could be a good time to try something like that. You always have to work through the time zone issue. That's always going to be there. But I think we're at a point where we're very much willing to do that. And so I think for our church, we've done this we have a monthly missions meeting, and we've had certain overseas missions partners join in that in our evening here. So it's probably their morning there or some other time. And so that's been, I think, somewhat effective for us. And then another possibility that's pretty creative is a virtual missions trip. Lots of different ways to potentially do that or focus on different things, but obviously you're going to involve some international calls with that. But different elements you could use. You could do a kind of a guided prayer walk with the area that partner is living in. Walk through the streets with them, and they can kind of guide you. And hey, this is what that is. That's a temple over there. Be praying for people in bondage of Buddhism or whatever it might be the case in their context. Showing different places where they're doing ministry could be pretty effective in a virtual missions trip. And it's just a way to meet new people that your overseas partners might work with, to experience a different culture even while you're staying home. And so you're just seeing ministry and you're seeing need through your screen in that way, which could be maybe not as eye-opening as actually traveling over there yourself, obviously, but could still be kind of a new thing and a kind of an epiphany moment for a few people who haven't seen that kind of need before, even if it's just over Zoom. I've heard about people just doing this as kind of a one-time event for maybe an hour or two, and I've heard of people doing kind of a tuning in at a certain time throughout a whole week and kind of doing a virtual mission trip that way. So lots of different potential ways to engage with your overseas partners, whether just through a call or through something more expanded. And you're probably going to need to work with people to know exactly what's going to appeal to your church in something like a virtual missions trip. But I think there's a lot of possibility there. So some people, a few I would say, have engaged in that, but it's maybe still something that's being worked out and that people are still catching on to. So that's kind of just starting off. That's kind of everything to do with keeping your usual church gatherings and church activities going. And we're going to launch into a new section here in just a moment, but Any questions, anything that I can clarify there with some of those ideas we've covered, whether from Chad or from anything from Philip before we move to our next section here?
Well, no, I think you're doing very well. I don't have any recommendation. It's good ideas.
Okay, great. Well, let's yeah, we'll keep on moving then, and I'll try to pause a couple different times for just to allow for any clarification or questions we might come up with. One other thing I did want to mention though, that's a little bit more on the cutting edge, and probably something that I think is still going to take some time to really catch on. But the virtual church is another way to kind of keep church activity going. But it's still, I think, very much in kind of this experimental space. But I mean, this is the kind of situation where you're putting on an actual headset, an Oculus Rift or something like that, and you're actually meeting with people in a very digital sense, where each of you has an avatar, kind of like you're seeing there, and you're able to connect with each other in that way, whether through chat or through voice. It's also possible to do this where everybody's visible and has this kind of going at the same time. But it's kind of it does present some unique opportunities, especially for areas where the church is a very sensitive or persecuted group. It kind of gives some anonymity that's maybe advantageous to certain groups to kind of try this virtual church setting. So a lot of people are really trying to, a few people I should say, are trying to push this forward and are being very creative with how this works. To me, it's a very interesting idea. Brings up some interesting questions though too. I've seen, actually virtual baptisms happening, and when you start thinking about virtual baptisms, virtual communion, you start asking some questions. And so I think definitely still working through some of those things. Physical church meetings, you just can't replace those with some of those events, and I think that's going to continue to be the feeling of a lot of people, and I think probably rightly so. But this is something that's very different that is happening and is pretty fascinating to see develop as well. So that's kind of a midway stop before moving on to outreach media. This was what I'm kind of really excited to share about today. So more than just keeping your regular local church activities going, finding some things to use media to actually develop a more discipleship efforts for your church. And so some of these things are also going to be familiar, but I think some of them are going to be a little bit new to people who might be watching this or tuning in now. And so let's start with some more familiar things that you may or may not have thought about. One thing is just thinking about web content and creating web content that's going to draw people in, that people are going to come back for. And so one thing you might think about is turning your church services into short form episodic content. So, lots of churches will post their whole sermon online, maybe even the whole service, which is good. Your local church people probably want that. You might be able also, though, to kind of parcel out things from that church service, create much more bite-sized pieces, and then use those as more attractional things for people that might come to your YouTube platform, your Facebook page, your website. And so taking a highlight out of a sermon, using the communion meditation, if it's particularly effective, maybe using that as a short video. Even potentially a performed song could be used. You get into some things you have to be aware of rights and copyright, that sort of things when you're getting into music content. But definitely seeing a lot of groups who are doing that, using just one song and on their pages. And I've actually seen. We have one guy in Chile with GMPI. He's been just doing little, very simple music videos where it's basically just the camera looking at him as he performs a song. And lots of people all over his country, or lots of people that speak Spanish, are using those videos, I think, as part of their online church services now. So we've seen him, he's got videos with hundreds of thousands, even some over 1 million views, just because people are so in need of that kind of content. So with web content, you might be attracting seekers, but you might also be helping out other churches. that maybe aren't as well equipped to do some media production as you are. So think about whether you can chunk up your church services into smaller pieces that might be effective in reaching other people or other congregations that need some pieces like that. That might be something really helpful to others. Another thing to think about with web content, maybe just think about doing a new series. Chad mentioned a little while ago, just getting on Facebook Live, maybe about weekly, and sharing a devotional thought. Exactly that kind of thing. Something simple, a daily devotional, maybe just a midweek devotional that can reach people, could be very effective. So that's something to think about. And you can get very creative with this, but I think it's definitely a good thing to just try something simple at first. That might just look like this: a guy with his laptop going through some thoughts, just once a week, or maybe you get to a point where you're doing it daily and sharing that with your audience. Another thing is just simple children or youth content. This little image is actually from a video of a team of ours in India, in a certain part of India, and every week they do about a 20 or 30-minute video, so pretty long, but a 20 or 30-minute video just to keep kids in their area engaged. They do a little bit of music, they do some Bible lesson, and they usually do a craft. So this is part of that craft section where they just show them how to make something that usually has a scriptural tie-in. So something like that maybe kids would enjoy, or something that maybe high schoolers would enjoy, something like that. You have to be creative to see what that might be, and different ways to engage that kind of audience as well would be a really good idea. Another thing is testimony interviews. That can be done very simply as well. Here at GMPI, we're doing something called Faith Greater Than Fear. Last year, starting at the beginning of April, we actually did 2 episodes of this every week. So we ended up, and at the end of the year, we had over 70 episodes of Faith Greater Than Fear, where our president or myself, we got on with someone from our local community here, from international areas, people all over the country, usually in some kind of ministry capacity. Just hearing from them, what's your life been like during the pandemic? What's your experience been? What are the challenges? And what kind of advice or input do you have to give others? And I think those kind of testimony interviews can also be really powerful. We did it kind of so that it lent itself to podcast as well. So it's usually 15 to 20 minutes, so a little bit longer. A lot of web content is probably shorter than that, but I think it can really help people where they're at, especially when you're speaking to a relevant subject like working your way through the pandemic. So think about doing interviews with people in your church. Maybe they would have something to share that would benefit others locally, or somebody else who just wanders onto your page. So thinking about producing a little bit of web content is a good idea for some outreach opportunities. And then I wanted to talk a little bit, maybe you're hearing me talk about creating web content. You're thinking, I just don't know if I'm equipped to do that. And I understand that it might seem a little bit challenging or seem very, very new. But actually, in this day and age, you can equip yourself pretty inexpensively and pretty easily. Of course, you need to take some time to kind of figure out all the nuts and bolts of things. So there's going to be a learning curve. But I want to just point out a few different things I think that would give you a pretty condensed basic package of some production equipment that can get you going. And really, this is based on using your smartphone. Everybody in this country pretty much seems to have a smartphone, and you can probably make use of it in this way. So using your smartphone, you need to buy a smartphone rig that you can put that in. It allows you to either hand hold it, or you can mount it on a tripod, so you have some stability there. And then you can, with most rigs, you're able to attach several things. You're probably going to want a shotgun mic, so you can point that mic right where you want to hear your sound. So the person who's speaking, you can point it right at them from some distance away and pick them up pretty well. And then have a camera light so that you're not, that person's not too dark. You can mount that right on there as well. Another thing that a lot of people generally find helpful is to be able to monitor the sound. You'll need some headphones. And to do that, especially with the iPhones today that don't have all the ports that they used to, you might need a splitter so that you can be plugging in your microphone, but also listening to your headphones at the same time. You can get all of these pieces and put that all together. Definitely under $200 if you want to do that. You can actually get quite a bit lower than that if you want to go for some of the most economical prices. So if you have a set like that, I think it's pretty basic, but I think that does give you a pretty good start if you're wanting to go out and create some web content. A lot of churches might have better, higher quality equipment available in the building, and that's great. Hopefully, people are making use of that for your church services or stuff you're doing inside like that. But maybe if you're wanting to go out and try something new and not wanting to lug a lot of things around, or maybe it's just not mobile stuff that you have at your church, maybe try something like this. There's all kinds of things that you can add to a setup like this to advance it more and more. You can get a gimbal stabilizer that makes things really nice and smooth, and those aren't actually that expensive either. And lots of different kinds of lights. You can get lapel mics that you attach right to their shirt for a different quality of sound that might be necessary sometimes. You can get those that are Bluetooth capable these days, so you don't have to have a wire going from your smartphone to that microphone. So just technology has given us lots of little gadgets that are really helpful these days. But to get started, I think that's about the basic package that you need, and it's pretty affordable. So hopefully that might be useful to a few people who might just want to be getting launched into creating some of their own content, or churches that want to get lean and mean and do something kind of new.
Nathaniel, do you have any inexpensive way to do any kind of teleprompter rig?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know of a couple different options. One is you can use a tablet as a teleprompter. You can get some free apps that will turn your tablet into a prompter. However, what you will need in order to do that is either a little bit of a structure that uses a mirror if you're going to kind of do a true teleprompter setup. And you'll have to, place that so that you're reading the prompter, the tablet, through that mirror. But a little bit more down and dirty is there are a couple apps, and the names aren't coming to me right now. I'd have to go back and look for them. But there are a couple apps that you can use on your phone or on a tablet that you can simply look at the tablet. So you're basically looking right close to where the lens is on your tablet or camera, and it will scroll for you as a teleprompter. And actually, I believe they're also created so that in the background, you can clearly see the words, but in the background, you're also seeing yourself. So you can kind of make sure that you're positioned, you're nice and centered, but you also have that possibility of reading text that you've already scripted. So there are, I can't remember the name of those apps right now, but they're very cheap, and I think there might even be one or two that is free that you can do that with. I think they're particularly designed for reporting, like news reporters that for a really split second sort of thing needs to pull up their phone, have a little copy, input it there, and report something. So it's not quite off the cuff. So that they can do it that way. I think that's kind of what those kind of apps were originally created for, but obviously can have a lot of other uses as well. So, all right, moving on to the next big thing here. This is a topic that this whole workshop could have been focused just on this. So I'm going to give you a really boiled down version of it. But you may or may not have heard of this thing that's happening kind of in the world of missions these days. It goes by several different names. Here at GMPI, we tend to refer to it as media to ministry. It'll often go by the shortened M2M. A lot of people will say that actually means media to movements. And originally, going back, maybe a couple years, it was more often called M2DMM. which meant media to disciple making movements. And then over time, it's just kind of gotten crunched down. And then movements, is a very particular kind of outreach and evangelism that has to do with a very multiplicative model. And so this kind of idea started very much pointed toward DMM, to disciple making movements, and to multiplication. And that's a great thing. And that's still one of the big practices right now, people who are trying to use this strategy. But it can also be used much more broadly. And so to kind of describe that broad sensibility, here we tend to say media to ministry. Maybe it's not feeding into a disciple making movement, but it's feeding into some kind of ministry where you're trying to connect with people through media first and bring them along this funnel, which you can kind of see here. There's a lot of detail in this funnel that I've shown here, and you may not be able to make everything out, so I do apologize for that. But I'm just going to kind of pick out some highlights and work through what this funnel is and what you can do with it. So the idea here is that there are about 2% of any population around the world, research has shown, about 2%, and in some cases higher, of people who are actively seeking in a spiritual sense. Anywhere around the world, you're going to have about 2% of people who are in that position, maybe facing some kind of dissatisfaction with life, some kind of event in their life that's shaken things up, that's been somewhat traumatic. There's things listed here, called belief disruption. This says economy, culture, religion, family, some of their personal things. Any of those kind of things can kind of insert people into this place of wondering where they're at and starting this kind of sense of seeking in a spiritual way. So what do we do to find those people with media? We use social media, and particularly we use ads. We create ads on social media as hooks for this kind of person to try to identify this kind of seeker. Lately, it's most common to do that through Facebook ads, but people can also use Google AdWords or other forms of ads to kind of attract these people. So they see this ad and they think, actually, that's something that pertains to me. And they click into that. And hopefully, it allows them to see a little piece of video, usually not very long at all, a minute or under, maybe a little bit of copy, a little bit of text. And maybe it's just a still image. Maybe it's just a interesting or intriguing still image that they see. They click into that ad and it takes them to some kind of landing page, or maybe a social media platform like a Facebook page. And then on that page, they're able to learn a little bit more about what this ad referenced. And then they're able to have an opportunity to connect with someone on that platform, to send a message to someone on the Facebook page, or to start a chat through a website. And so they've gone from just seeing a little bit of media to actually engaging with another person usually through messaging first. Then from there, the online responder that's going to answer those messages will eventually try to start sharing some gospel ideas with them, building on what they've already seen, and eventually leading them hopefully toward having a video conference, meeting in a deeper way online. The next step from there, from after your social media follow-up, you're hopefully going to move on to, as I've said here, F2F. That means face-to-face connection. So after video conferencing, see if they're interested in taking the next step, meeting in a public place, meeting at a coffee shop somewhere, and in their local area, and talking more, getting more serious with what they're wanting to discuss. And then from there, you're hopefully looking at someone who's open to joining some kind of group, some kind of small group, or some kind of even bringing them into church, depending on what the context is. And so you're working your way through that funnel, starting with the media, an ad of some kind, using social media to follow up, and then finding this face-to-face connection. And then hopefully, once they've been able to join a new community, they're able to eventually come to a new place of faith. And as I said, there's lots of different elements to this image here. disciple.tools, as you'll see right there in the middle, is a tool of keeping track of all people that might get contacted to you on a page, making sure that everybody gets a response quickly. It's a free tool that is really effective in trying to make sure that you stay organized and that all of those contacts, all of those seekers get followed up. And then it says follow-up coalition here, just making the point that with this kind of funnel, you're usually looking at something that's probably going to take a few different groups or partners to really get it going. You know, you're going to need someone who's able to provide that media or maybe that tech support for your site or your Facebook page, whatever you're going to use. Somebody to do that. You're going to need somebody to respond online. You might even need a few people to do that to keep up the pace of all the people that are trying to connect. And then you're probably going to need a network of people on the ground that are able to meet these folks. I need to keep it general, but just as an example, there's a particular Muslim majority nation that GMPI is working with, and they have an office of I think about 10 to 15 people, and their whole job is to put this media out there and then to collect all these seekers and contacts, collect all this data, and connect with them through messaging. And then they are able to, if these people want to actually meet face to face with someone, they're coming from all over this large country. And so this office of 10 to 15 people, they're not able to travel and meet all these people, of course. I mean, they're finding new seekers, I think 2 seekers at least every day. And so they're sending these names out to field workers all around the country who can follow up with someone in their local area. So that takes a kind of network there, a kind of coalition to bring all this together. However, I think an individual church in a large town could actually get something like this going. With ads, you can really focus your target very specifically to a geographic area. So you could keep things pretty tight to your town and just see who might come in, who might be attracted by that, who might want to start a conversation online and eventually move that offline. I think there's definitely a way to do this so that all the people that you need to keep this to get this going and to keep this going are right in your local church. I think that's a real possibility, and I'm hoping that in the future, more and more American churches might try to start engaging with this. I think different cultures present different challenges for this kind of strategy, but there's a lot of exciting possibility here that I think in the future we're going to see more and more of. Just a couple other points about this. It's best usually if you're going to do something like this, you might take some flack of people who start down your funnel but actually become angry or become argumentative. And it's usually good to kind of filter out the true seekers from those who are just trolling or those who are just trying to start a fight. So that's usually a part of this strategy as well. Now, after I've kind of gone through that, I'll have a moment for a few questions here in just a moment, but I wanted to make a couple recommendations about learning more, maybe particularly about M2M, but also some other things as well. So here are a few things you might want to check out. Take down these little links that might be helpful to you. The first thing here is kingdom.training. They're a completely free training platform online that kind of will get you familiar with the media to disciple making movements specifically. That process specifically is what they'll kind of train you on and get you going just on a self-paced online course. So that might be a good place to start if you're interested in that. A little bit more involved way to get started with M2M is taking a course at missionmediau.org or Mission Media University. They offer a course that's foundations of media to movements. And so it's, I think, a 5 or 6 week course. You do have to pay for that one, but that'll really get you launched. It'll actually get some work started for you if you're interested in getting something like that going. And then not so much focused on M2M, but a couple other helpful resources might be mobileministryforum.org. They give a lot of content about using smartphones or other kind of simpler production equipment to make ministry content. You can go there and hear about maybe the best microphones at a low cost that you could use with your smartphone or with your DSLR. A lot of different really quality recommendations, very practical things you can find from Mobile Ministry Forum. And then KavanaughMedia.org is run by John Rawls, who actually is in Maryville, Tennessee area now. So he's local to, very close to Johnson. And he runs a social media marketing organization that particularly helps ministries. He works with people from Jesus Film to Pioneers to us here at GMPI and lots of other missionary partners as well. And he's always eager and very much wants to help people who are trying to get into some Christian social media marketing. And so he has a live show where he goes through some training of that every week. You can find that on GMPI's page or on his pages on Facebook or on our websites. He also has a podcast, and he has online courses that are free as well. So that can be a really great resource with lots of content for you. And I'll just put a bug in your ear about one thing that's kind of coming soon. It's not yet available, but here at GMPI, we're working on a platform called Nomad Academy, which is media production training, but also media strategy training. So it's going to take you through strategy about how to distribute and use media, teach you about storytelling, but also teach you about shooting, media production, and then also how to share that in the best way, in the most effective way, in an evangelistic sense. And so that's not yet up and going. We're hoping later this year we'll get that started. We're offering it in English first. We've designed it so it's simple English, so that people all around the world could potentially make use of it. And we hope to quickly translate that into several strategic languages as well. We're hoping that'll be a really key tool for some folks to use that want to get involved in media ministry. So do keep those things in mind. I hope that those could be useful to you and get you started in what you might be most interested in when it comes to media and ministry. And so that pretty much wraps me up for this little workshop, but I'll stick around here for a little while. If anybody has any follow-ups or any points of interest you'd like me to comment on, I'd be happy to do that. But hopefully that's been useful to some people who've been able to tune in.
Well, thank you very much, Nathaniel. Very, very informative. I'm going to look into some of that equipment. I think that's something we could use around our office. We're doing more little video things, and some of that equipment I think could make it more simple. I did a little thing for Senior Saints, and I printed it for my teleprompter. I just printed it out on really big paper and had it thumbtacked, to a clipboard to try and read it. So, and somebody just hand holding. Yeah. Chad, okay, we have Chad and Chris, and now Bruce Kraft has shown up. Does anybody else have any questions that they would like to ask Nathaniel?
One thing I would ask you, Nathaniel, I don't know what your level of experience with YouTube is, but since we're now starting to transition towards the live streaming on YouTube rather than Facebook, is there anything that you would offer as advice on things we should or shouldn't do, to make that YouTube live streaming experience and our YouTube channel, better or more effective or whatever?
Maybe one thing that just quickly comes to mind, maybe you guys are already doing this, but usually if you have a little bit of lead in, if you want to create just a simple image and maybe even incorporate a little bit of a countdown, maybe for, at least 2 or maybe even 5 minutes, that just allow people to kind of come in and so they don't feel like they've missed anything, and set that up to start a certain time. I think a little lead in like that, it can be really helpful to people. Obviously they're going to be able to go back and watch it, catch up later if they want, but I think that's an effective thing to do so that people get online and everybody's all joined in together at the same time. Trying to think quickly, depending on what you're trying to incorporate into your service. I don't think, generally speaking, not tons of bells and whistles aren't needed, but usually maybe having a couple different camera angles if possible, one wide and one close up on whoever's whoever's speaking, and maybe if the close-up can move around, if it's a musical part of the service, is always a good thing. And if you can use certain tools, like one example would be Ecamm, but there's plenty of different ones out there that if you want to like put in names on the screen, the name of your pastor, you can very easily throw names like that up with a few different applications that might also just give your presentation a little bit of an edge. Nothing comes to mind immediately that particularly pertains to the interface of YouTube, but I think if you've been doing things on Facebook, the way that you've probably been presenting on Facebook would be very similar to how you would present on YouTube, generally speaking.
All right, thank you.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, anything else? Well, Nathaniel, thank you very much. And you might, I'm sure you would entertain, an email or something from
Sure.
somebody that may have a question. Why don't you just share your email address with us?
Yeah, I'd absolutely be happy to share some helpful links or any help I might be able to offer myself. So yeah, you can reach out to me at n.dunn@gnpi.org. So n.dunn@gnpi.org. And I get lots of emails, but I'll definitely try to get back to you as quick as I can. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate everyone attending. Have a good day.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining.
Bye.
Thank you.